What's up, everybody? Welcome to Undisciplined by Design. This is a show where we get to talk with innovation leaders across the country about how they're driving innovation and creating the future. Today, we get to talk with Lisa K. Solomon. She's the Futurist in residence at the Stanford D.school, where she gets to teach people how to think about taking action and agency in creating their own future. Stick around and see what's next. All right. Well, hey, Lisa, thanks for coming on the show today. It's really fun just to be here in this environment always. And I know that you have a lot that we could all learn from. So really appreciate being on the show. Why don't we get started with just talking to us about who you are? You know, let's get a little background. What are some of the highlights that led you to where we are today?
Aaron, thanks so much. It's really fun to be here, and it's fun to have you here in the Bay Area. Sometimes when I think about where I am in this moment as someone that did not grow up here but grew up in the East Coast, I think of one of my favorite quotes from Stuart Brand, who is a great futurist who started the Whole Earth Catalog and the Long Now Foundation, which I'm now a board member of, and we can talk about it. But he said, "This present moment used to be the unimaginable future." So you asked me who I am. In this present moment, what I do every day is get up and I think about how to help more people feel agency in a world that feels overwhelmingly complex and uncertain and ambiguous. So I do that in a number of different ways. I write books, I write articles, I teach classes, I work with executives. But at its core, I get up every day thinking, how do I empower more people to feel like they can shape the futures they want to be a part of? Because I believe those skills are teachable and learnable. And I believe that we have to do a better job helping more people develop them in applied ways.
Okay, that's pretty awesome. I think there's a lot we want to unpack there and dig into. But even just before we go into that any further, that idea of giving people agency over, I think is so powerful. A lot of times people look at this idea of being a futurist or thinking about business strategy or even their own personal life as something that's just kind of going to happen to them.
Yes.
And they'll have to react to it. And you probably have done the activity before. You have people get in a room and line up on a matrix of like, you know, stand on this side if you think that you can change the future or your own future, and over here if you think you have no power over it. And that's always so interesting to see where people land on that and how many people really don't feel like they have that ability.
Well, why would they feel like they have that ability? They've not explicitly been taught those things. I mean, So yes, I spend my days thinking about the future. I guess now you could say I'm a futurist, but I'm still uncomfortable with that term, and we hopefully will get into that.
Okay.
But I have more than anything empathy for leaders and learners of all ages that are expected to be able to navigate this moment in time where we are experiencing more flux, more uncertainty, more ambiguity without any training, really. I, Aaron, have spent many moments working with course students, but leaders, and I'll ask them, how many people here have taken a class in history? Without doubt, everybody's hands goes up. They all have. They could tell me some of them are masters in history, some of them are PhDs. And then I'll say, okay, great. Well, how many people here have taken a class on futures? Aaron, 0. Maybe I'll get one ringer who's taken a scenario planning class. Okay. And then I'll say, well, which one of these can we influence? And all of a sudden it becomes very clear to people, wow, I am wildly underprepared, undertrained, undersupported in thinking about how to shape the future. And I think, well, we can change that. We can actually lean into ways of helping more people feel like the decisions they make today will have an impact for the future to come, whether that future is a week from now, whether it's many months or years from now. But how would people know that they can do that if they haven't been given practice time? And the time to practice it, Aaron, is not a crisis.
Right.
When I think about where most people got an overnight flood of you've got to make decisions amid high ambiguity and uncertainty, I'm transported back 5 years ago to the pandemic, where we were expecting leaders to have the blueprint on how to do this when they've had no experience making decisions with incomplete information, navigating the levels of uncertainty, dealing with something that they had never experienced before when the stakes couldn't have been higher. That's a lot to manage. So ideally, we give students and we give leaders time to practice these skills before everything is on the line.
Awesome. So lots of things that we can dig into about even just the practicality. How does one do these things? But I want to back up a little bit first because you have a really interesting background. And we lead up to today where, whether we're comfortable with the term or not, you're a futurist at Stanford University, at the Stanford University D.school. Would love to hear more about what that entails. But let's also back up a bit. Start maybe where you were thinking about this creative ambiguity, how to embrace that. What have been some of the highlights of your career that have led you to be in a position to help other people think this way?
Yeah. Isn't it funny, Aaron, when you look back, for me anyway, when I made choices going forward, they didn't make sense. When I look back, I'm like, oh, okay, I see how these all line up. I'll take you to the way back, Aaron, when I was a kid. And I was always interested in what made for great experiences, those sort of fully immersive experiences where you lose yourself, like going to Disney World or just having a great, meal at a great restaurant. So I later learned that the choices you make to create those experiences is what I would now call design. So I was a self-taught design nerd, right? Really trying to understand what choices were made in order to tee up experiences that work or don't work. And so that was all through my high school and even in college. I was so interested in, how decisions came to be to create value for people. And found myself shortly after college working at a design strategy firm. We didn't call it that at the time. This was a long time ago. We didn't really have the vocabulary that we do now around what design is and design strategy at the highest level. We called it marketing. How to work with existing companies to help them grow their revenue, but really to change the kind of relationship that they had with their customers. And it was through that I really learned the power of what we would again now call design thinking or design research, how to discover new opportunities and how to bring them to life. So for most of my career, I would say first and foremost, I'm a designer. I'm a designer of experiences. I'm a designer of conversations, which I ended up writing a book about. And I've always been interested in particularly bringing something new to the world. So not surprisingly, I found myself in the Bay Area in the late 90s when this thing that was on the horizon called the internet was just becoming a thing. And I was like, wow, I really want to be where new ideas are springing up and people are again making choices to create value for people, and end up working at what we would now call a UX experience firm, helping these new .coms figure out how to make choices to take advantage of this new technology. And we were all on the rise and it was amazing. And this was 99. Then, of course, the bubble burst in 2000. And overnight, my firm laid off 30% of their staff. And I was devastated because we spent a lot of time hiring the smartest people, the nicest people. And I was like, who is making these decisions without a care for the holistic experience? And that really opened my eyes that I wanted to apply design towards the leadership level, towards thinking about organizational culture, and spent a lot of time trying to find fellow travelers who was doing that work. Long story short, I ended up almost by accident learning about a scenario planning firm that was housed in the Bay Area called Global Business Network. And they were focused on helping leaders navigate uncertain futures. And I thought, well, that is such an interesting way of thinking about getting ahead of uncertainty. So I ended up spending about 7 years at this firm learning the practice and the discipline of futures thinking and scenario planning and how you engage with leaders on strategic challenges that didn't have known answers. And for me, it was just another application of design. So when we think about engaging with people and getting them to explore futures, getting them to have a discovery mindset, getting them comfortable thinking about how to frame a challenge in a way that will help them learn forward, helping them learn how to experiment by bringing prototypes to life and gathering information to see if those are the right ideas or not, I just thought this is an incredible extension of all of the work that I had done before. So it's really been this blend of design underlying where you apply it towards thinking about the future, towards bringing about something new to life. So that was a foundational part of my career. And then I pivoted to become what I would call an accidental educator, working at an incredible, really revolutionary MBA program housed in San Francisco at the California College of Arts. So imagine an MBA program that's housed in a 100-year arts and crafts at the time institution with the idea of, if we believe that leaders of the future are going to have to get as comfortable with their creative problem-solving skills as they are with their practical skills, why would we ask them to park their creative thinking when they go and get this degree that gives them credibility and license to be in the executive room? Yeah. Why wouldn't we just blend them in a new format, in a new way that allowed them to practice these skills and develop them holistically? And at the time they were expanding, because I think they really hit on something, and Nathan Shedroff, who is an incredible designer, one of the OG designers, who was the visionary behind this program, asked me to come and teach a foundational class there called Innovation Studio. And when I tell you, Aaron, it was like a gift from the heavens. I found the medium that I believe I was meant to design, which is classroom experiences, which is helping take everything I had done on behalf of executives and on behalf of clients before to bring it into helping ambitious young people feel like that they can shape the future by learning these practices of innovation, by learning these practices of applied imagination, of discovery, of experimentation. And so for the last 14 years or so, I've been on a journey to help more leaders do that. And for the last 7 years, I've been at the Stanford D.school to help infuse a futures lens into their great foundation of design work. Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I kind of feel like maybe you've been reading my journal or something, because there's I started my work in this space started in design thinking and more thinking about, a client needs, maybe a systems level change, but it was using the design thinking process. And then the more I discovered about futures thinking and Foresight, the more I wanted to bring that in. And I saw the overlap because I saw design not as this static thing that maybe would normally be defined by designers who are thinking about the craft of design. It felt very natural to say these aren't the same. Design thinking and futures and Foresight aren't the same, but they really do play together well, and the mindsets can be sort of tapped for both and to kind of bounce between them. And I think that's kind of rare for people to realize that. So what you're doing and what's so fascinating about it is that you're actually making that accessible to a lot of people. How did you go about making that transition, or was it just natural for you? Did you always think like a futurist and then all of a sudden it was just you had the language for it? Or did you have to really go through a process of saying, okay, I used to be a designer, whether you're a pretend designer or a certified stamped designer. Did you have to make a transition from that? Say, I was a designer and now I'm a futurist.
Yeah, again, I'm not sure I ever have these distinct moments. Everything feels super organic to me because I'm always learning and I'm always looking to make those connections and to say, wow, this is similar to this. But instead of designing a product or being curious about what this product does for this person's life, I'm looking at conversations that can be designed and meaning that we can put the same kind of care in thinking about what do we want to be able to help the person do or feel or experience, those same kind of high-level meta ways of thinking about, again, agency. And maybe we should even back up and get super concrete because design can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. One of my favorite definitions comes from Nathan Shedroff, founder of the great MBA in Design Strategy program. And he says, as a designer, it is my responsibility to make choices that trigger the right responses. Nice. Say that. It's my responsibility as a designer to make choices that trigger the right responses. Notice he's not saying to choose this font or this Pantone or this shape. He is taking responsibility to help the person he is designing for be successful. So then when you unpack that says, well, it is your job to learn more about what the person that you're designing for needs or wants or is hopeful for in their lives. And for me, it boils down to really understanding then that design is about understanding how to help someone else get what they need. And I define it as functional utility, right? Helping them do something, and emotional engagement, helping them feel something about something. And so really helping make decisions that help people get those things can be applied to anything. And so getting back to your question about how did I think about making the choice between being on the client side and designing conversations that would help a leadership team understand a sort of uncertain space that was critical to their business, like we would do in scenario planning, I would think about what is my job regarding these students that want to develop skills to help them bring new things to the world. And so it was really fun to design backwards, to say, okay, well, at the end of this semester, what do I want them to be able to do? Yeah. Okay, great. Now, how do I break it down to think about how am I going to scaffold the experiences, the readings, the guests that we bring in order to help them feel that they were getting a foundational underpinning in the skills, but also developing the applied experience, right, by doing it in order to bring it to life. And Nathan, working with Nathan, he gave me huge latitude. I mean, one of the great things about working within a 100-year-old art school is that they work with practitioners. They understand the importance of the applied experience. And so it's not a lecture-based. It's all about how do you go out and do. And so Innovation Studio, the class that I taught, was about giving them the framing and then the assignments and the capstone project to go do. And what was also great about it is that, Aaron, I would get them on day one of their MBA experiences. So I also felt the responsibility of shaping how they were going to show up in this graduate program, what kind of learner that they wanted to be. So every semester we would pick a big topic from which they would apply their skills towards. So first one was we explored the future of money, the future of print media, right at the precise moment where like everything was going digital, right? So there was something really great about the power of constraints to get them to really think about like print media, its utility. We did one on the future of voting, just as an example. And then we would kind of scaffold the process for them to learn those skills. And the thing that I loved about it is that because I wasn't like, you must do this and you must get this right answer and I'm going to test you this way, every semester had magic to it. Every semester had some kind of emergent aha that we couldn't have planned for. But it was really about shifting their mindset that innovation is a thing that you can go and pick up in these certain ways, to really thinking about themselves as innovators, which was a very different stance on how they saw themselves.
Yes, innovation as a part of my being versus innovation as even a framework. Right?
Yeah, and I think, going back to how I think about the kinds of experiences that I think really matter to students, I'm trying to almost be like a Trojan horse for them of unleashing their own capabilities. Yes, I design experiences. Yes, I try to make them accessible. I try to scaffold them in a way that makes sense. But the best part is when they discover it for themselves. And at the D.school, one of the ways that we get students to reflect on their own learning is at the end of class, end of a quarter, we'll say, take a time to reflect on, I used to think ... and now I think ... like one of my absolute favorite reflection tools. And the most rewarding thing after teaching a class like I teach called Inventing the Future, which we could talk about, or the class I'm teaching now called View from the Future, is when they say things like, I used to think the future was for other people to decide, and I would have to react. And now I think I have the skills and capabilities to do it. Or I used to think that the future was intrinsic to other people like talent. And now I think I can grow my own ability to shape the future I want to be a part of. And when you see that kind of reflection, you think, there is no greater gift. There's no greater gift. Because one thing we know is that the world is not going to get more simple on its own. So if we can do our job in helping more people feel like that they can be future shapers, that they can have agency over their lives, that is a gift.
Let's also talk maybe a little bit, because you've been involved in so many different projects. I know you've got projects that you've led for corporate partners. You've got things that you're doing outside of even teaching at Stanford. So you can pick roulette of, what would you like to talk about in this regard. But what are some ways that, projects you've seen come to life, and maybe ways that you've seen this applied and things that you've been involved in leading or driving?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. It is true, Aaron. I feel like I'm restless myself. I love teaching futures thinking. And I sometimes say, like that movie Sixth Sense, I don't know if you remember that movie, in the Wayback Machine with Bruce Willis, where there's this little kid who says, like, I see dead people. I see design everywhere. I'm like that. I'm like, I see design everywhere and I can't help it. And I want to bring it to life, and I don't just want to teach it. And I also want to teach case studies of real life things. But I'll give you just a quick overview of some of the things that I have found myself pulled to create, is what I would say. And it started with, again, another accidental journey about 5 years ago, where at the D.school, It was 2019, and we were looking ahead at what was for sure going to be another contentious presidential election, and we were already experiencing a world filled with division and particularly continued frustration with the younger generation that they were not voting and using their agency to be citizens the way we might have hoped. And I created a new class there at the time called Designing the President. And the whole idea was to use practices of design and futures in an applied way to help more young people feel like that they have agency in getting engaged in the presidential election. Yeah. I'll spare you all the details, but at a high level, for those other nerdy civics people out there, it was like Doris Kearns Goodwin, who is an incredible presidential biographer who really focuses on presidential leadership, like Lincoln and others, meets Daniel Kahneman thinking slow. So like imagine helping more young people have the space and time to be deliberative in their thinking. So instead of saying to them, why don't you vote? You should vote. We would say things like, hey, when you turn 18, you become a hiring manager. Whoa, you have power. That's the most exciting thing you could do. And you get to hire the most important position in this country, if not the world. How do you go about thinking about that? So all of a sudden we're breaking it down, we're making it clear, we're not saying, why don't you vote, which is like an abstract word. We would say, hey, what are you going to do with this power? How are you going to think about it? And then we'd break it down and we say, do you know what the president does? Do you know what you're hiring for? And even the AP civics students would be like, the president is this ombudsman? No, let's go find the job description. It's in the Constitution. So the whole time we're sort of like planting these scaffolds to help them feel empowered to understand, to break it down. Then we gave them this list of leadership traits. Well, now that you know what the president does, as described in the job description, Article 2 of the Constitution. And by the way, I'm not even a huge civics person, right? Like I'm sort of just making these things more accessible, breaking down these barriers. And all of a sudden they're having a much better conversation with, someone that might have a very different point of view. Wow, I really care about someone that is empathetic. You want a decision maker. Why do you think that's important? This is why I think this is important. Now all of a sudden they're engaging in dialogue. And then they would agree upon these leadership skills and past experiences. And there's a whole bunch of other fun ways to get them to really think through and almost iterate why they believe their point of view and maybe change their point of view in a safe way. But my favorite part, thinking like a futurist, is once they would agree upon that, then we gave them scenarios of the future. Okay. We created 6 scenarios where things like, and I kid you not, Aaron, I'm not making this up, 2019, we created a scenario of a flu-like virus that emanated out of China, that took down the world economy and disrupted everyone overnight because there was no novel, it was a novel virus, there was no treatment, there was no diagnoses. That was just one. We also had a election hacking scenario. We had a scenario of a state insurrection of a fringe group. And it was a short description of getting them to transport into the future, and then using the leadership qualities that they say that they really cared about, they had to make a speech to the American people embodying those leadership qualities in response to that future. So what did it do? It immersed them into the future, and now all of a sudden they had to prototype a point of view that they had. Yeah. It was so incredible, the transformation we got in these students in just like 3 hours. It was incredible. And the reason why we could come up with these scenarios, like the pandemic, was that one of my co-creators had worked on the avian flu crisis years before. So again, the future is kind of in plain sight if you bring it forward. So we were going to bring this to classrooms everywhere, but then of course the pandemic did hit. Yeah. So I was like, wow, this thing works. What do we do? So thinking like a futurist, knowing like, hey, what's something we can bet on? We can bet that more young people are going to want to vote. That's actually not uncertain. We can sort of double down on that. How do we get this into the hands of more young people? So we took it from a live in-person experience and I put everything online. I digitized it. I partnered with some ed tech folks and we created a free access to this, which is now called Vote by Design. And I just started reaching out to all kinds of teachers and civic education folks and different associations cold and just made it available to them. And through 2020, we probably touched 10,000 students just by that, like sheer, who needs what? How can I get in the hands of more people? How can I reduce the friction to getting access to it? So an incredible story of, I think, how design and futures can actually change people's lives. So that was just part one of the story.
Okay.
Do you want to hear part two?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
So part two, which is the part that was like the lead up. Part two was once we put it online, all of a sudden I started getting incoming emails from other, what I would call accidental civic catalysts, like I found myself in. And remember, 2020 was a pretty remarkable moment to be in.
Yeah.
So here we are, it's June of 2020. We were also not only dealing with the pandemic and trying to come out of that, but the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd and the uprisings and public safety and different responses. So I get this this incoming email from a 6'8" basketball coach named Eric Rebineau, who at the time was coaching at Georgia Tech down in Atlanta. Oh. And Rev had his own aha moment where he was helping his players on the Georgia Tech basketball team deal with the aftermath of the George Floyd killing. And Atlanta was huge protest. And most of his players were players of color, and they were just feeling so distraught, so disengaged. And they were having a Zoom team meeting to try to process everything going on. And a senior on their team named Malachi Rice said to those team members, well, if you all care so much about the future, how many people here are registered to vote? Aaron, guess how many people raised their hands?
I'm going to guess less than 5.
Yeah, 0. How about 0? Coach Rev, who was in his 50s at the time, had like an instant midlife crisis. And he said to himself, oh my gosh, I'm probably the most important adult in these college athletes' lives. They spend more time with me than they do with their parents at this point. How in my decades of coaching have I never thought to ask, are you registered to vote? So stayed up all night thinking about it, gets on Twitter the next day and says, he's a very passionate guy, Coach Rev, and he says, listen, on election day, we should not practice or play games. We should give time to our student athletes to vote. Hashtag all vote, no play. Puts up a petition. Again, thinking like a futurist, right? Putting it out there in the world. 2,000 people within weeks signed this petition to support the idea that if we want to allow our students to vote, our student athletes, let's cancel games and practice. Yeah. It was such a powerful idea that the Student Athletic Committee within the NCAA nationally took it to the NCAA Commission and said, we should make this a national holiday, and we shouldn't just do it this year, we should do it every year. And Aaron, at the time, it was such a bold idea. They passed it unanimously, which never happens. So this is all the backstory to say, why was Coach Rev calling me? He said, I have all this momentum. People are excited about it, but I've looked at all the civic material out there. I'm trying to find an easy-to-use guide to help me share with these coaches and athletes about how to vote and how to be a good citizen, and it looks like gobbledygook. It is overwhelming, it's jargon, it's too complicated. I hear you design things that work. So partner with me to make appropriate materials for coaches and athletes, to make it simple for them to vote, for starters, but also to help them understand that all of the skills that they're building as college athletes, where they have to work across difference, where they're working towards a purpose, where you have to come back from hardship, are the same kinds of things that we want our citizens to be able to do. So all this is to say, I'm simplifying it a little bit, but accidentally, I got started on a journey to help Coach Rev create civic drill playbooks, resources, a leadership fellowship for engaged athletes for an organization that has now touched, in the last 4 years, close to 200,000 student athletes by designing materials that meet athletes where they are, that help coaches see their role in helping support not just great athletes, but great citizens to bring that to the world. So that is now called theteam.org, and encourage your readers to take a look and to look at the backstory. But it's a great example of what I think we do as futurists, to say, let's not just buy what we would call official future, that young people are apathetic and that they don't care about voting. Let's say, no, what would it look like if we envision a future where everybody felt empowered to vote and everybody had the experiences that would build the confidence that they can vote, and to do it in a way that was meaningful, that engaged functional utility. I understand how to vote, emotional engagement. I'm capable of voting, and we go down this path, in this case, it was athletes, to design things that spoke for them, oh my gosh, it's been transformative. Yeah. So it's probably enough for now, but I could tell you dozens of individual stories that would make you feel hopeful that we are capable of helping young people design the kinds of civic futures that they want to be a part of.
Yeah, nice. There's two things that keep coming through that I'm hearing I think would be interesting to get your take on. One of them has to do with designing experiences, which obviously is right in your wheelhouse. So I think that's natural, but there's a lot of intentionality. Every one of these stories, it kind of involves designing an experience around. So I think that's universal and amazing. Also asking really good questions. And that's a great part of design thinking. It's a part of designing experiences, but also obviously looking at the future. So you pick whichever one of those you want to talk about. But what are some good questions that you can ask to drive that curiosity that gets people to unlock from the place that maybe they see one future or they see one possible solution, or even maybe they just see one constraint or roadblock? What are the kinds of questions you're asking that help with that? One that I heard you say earlier is the idea of reframing the vote to who would you like to hire?
Yeah,
right.
Totally.
So what are some more questions like that really tend to draw this out of people?
Specifically, when we think about questioning, I think often of my colleague, Warren Berger. He's a wonderful author who wrote a book called A More Beautiful Question. And he really traces back some of the most disruptive innovations of our time, come back to what he calls beautiful questions that don't necessarily have a single answer, questions that open us up to curiosity and wonderment, questions that allow us to engage with the world in a different kind of way. And he, in order to write this book, he did a lot of research, and he found that the best questioner in the world, I think this is a research study that he found out of Australia, is a 4-year-old girl who asks, I forget what the number is, something like 300 questions a day, mostly of her parents, typically her mother. I know I'm making some assumptions here. And that's incredible when you just pause and think about that we are actually born to wonder. And one of the things that I always try to remind whoever I'm working with is that we as humans are blessed with this incredible machinery called imagination, right? And questioning is totally tied to imagination. But that when we go to school, that machinery gets, let's call it, narrowed, domesticated, as my friends at the Center for Science and Imagination talk about, right? So we have to unleash that imagination, and questioning and curiosity is a huge lever to do that. And going back to Warren's book, what he says is he has another study where he looks at what happens to that incredible machinery of wondering and questioning when we enter formal education. And he has this chart early on in the book where, on the whole, reading goes up, writing goes up, math goes up, questioning takes a nosedive the moment we enter formal education. Wow, well, why is that? Well, at least here in the Western world and the United States, you could see that our systems start to reward known answers. They start to reward convergent thinking, things that are measurable, things that allow the teacher to understand if they're doing a good job, yes or no. To have a divergent questioner in your class when you're trying to get through material is a nuisance. So we are disincentivizing people to learn how to ask those why is the sky blue questions? Why is it like this? And again, it's interesting to go back and look at some of the great disruptive innovators. They tend to be people that did not do well in traditional school. They dropped out. Frank Gehry, for example, is a phenomenal architect, nearly flunked out of school. Steve Jobs famously stopped out of school. Mark Zuckerberg, among others. Why is that? Well, they just found that the way that they took in the world was not congruent with how things were being rewarded and taught. But notice then it's the courage to be like, wait a minute, I don't want to compromise the way I'm looking at the world. I'm going to go off and do it. How much courage that took. So all of this is to say, I try to give permission to my students to first observe what's going on around them, which importantly means putting down their devices. Importantly means being uncomfortable with just kind of being and taking in, and then layering on that question to say like, oh, I wonder why it's like this. Yeah. Does it have to be like this? Yeah.
Awesome. Well, to bring it full circle, you're getting to prompt those kinds of questions to future leaders of the world. When you look at the future and all the futures that could be created, what are some of the specific areas that you think are going to potentially have the most impact? The levers could get pulled and they could go any direction, right? What are some of the things that are on your mind that are emergent because of what you're seeing through your own practice and the work that you're doing at Stanford?
Yeah. Thanks for that question, Aaron. I mean, in the world that we're living in, that feels like it's teeing up more uncertainty, more complexity, more ambiguity, more volatility, the VUCA world, I often think like this could be the least VUCA of days to come, right? The context that we are living in is not going to get simpler. We have to change. So I feel with each passing day more urgency to make these approaches more accessible to more people. So for me, that means, yes, teaching my classes, but it means writing more. It means uplifting more great works that other people are doing. I mean, the good news, Aaron, and be curious if you found this too, is I feel like since 2020, since specifically March of 2020, the world of futurist thinking is having an explosion. Everyone wanted to understand and think about like, when was this pandemic going to end? What were we going to do? So all of a sudden scenario planning and futurist had this like bump in popularity. And so the good news is I feel like the field is opening up to more people. Thank goodness, because it shouldn't be for a few. And this has definitely been on the mission I've been a part of for a long time, but it's just felt much more urgent. So the fact that more people are being opened up to how there's this discipline, it exists for a while, I didn't know about it, and they're learning about it, I think that is fantastic. But I feel like that we need to help more people practice these skills in ways that meet them where they are. So for me, whether it's working for student athletes and seeing that, wow, you know what, you already have more influence than you can imagine. How are you going to use it for good? And to help them reflect and notice on it, that is fantastic. For working with leaders to help them pause and give them permission to say, look, I know that you're trying to deliver on that 3-year plan, but the world is changing around you. Take a pause, allow yourself more time in your schedule to wonder, to daydream a little bit, to come back, to take some inspiration from a science fiction story or from a bright spot that you saw to wonder what you can do to amplify it. I'm just trying to find more ways to generate more grounded hope in various levers. And while things are feeling so difficult, I am trying to remind people that we still have the ability through our micro moments to make a difference, right? To find the upside of the challenging moment, of the uncertainty. And to do that, in as small of a way as possible, right? By taking a pause, by noticing something good, by celebrating it with others, right? That's a core foundation to, helping more people feel like, wow, I did this thing and this thing had an impact and now it was a positive impact. Now I want to do more of this thing.
Lisa, this is great. This has been so fun. You give good energy always, and this is inspiring. So I think you're doing that in the work you're doing. Please keep doing that. And thanks for sharing some of it with us. You're good example of what we could all try and strive to in this field. So thank you for doing all that. And thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Aaron. I'm delighted. This has been a super fun project. Thanks for making Futures Thinking more available to more people, and encourage people to reach out if they want to learn more about my work or just questions, because I'm always learning.
Yeah. Where can they find more of the work that you're doing and follow along?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now I'm just trying to keep up with all the work because I'm trying to put it out in the world. So LinkedIn, definitely follow me. I'm in the process of updating my website, lisaksolomon.com, all spelled out, and incorporating a more durable Substack to come, right? Ever the Futurist to come. But right now, LinkedIn is the most current place, but new website coming. All
right. Well, I think lots of people should follow along and learn more about it. But again, thanks again. And good luck with class today.
Thank you.